you to admit people as you come in. Just put your name and your organization in the chat and your city too. We want to see where you're coming from. So put your name, organization, and city in the chat. So I'm here with the lovely Stephanie Stolzenbach, who is our Director of Clinical Services at the Leadership Program. And my name is Elaine Porcher, and I'm the Senior Director of Business Development. And what Stephanie does is she works with our social work interns and our social workers, and she manages our clinical services at the Leadership Program and also at our sister program, P2L, Pathways to Leadership, which is our nonprofit organization that mostly does mental health services. And today we're going to talk about transformative SEL, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective of questions that we want to ask as educators. As educators, how can we be our best in SEL, in transformative SEL, by asking the right questions? And this kind of comes up a lot, right? When we're talking about how we can use questioning to further our students' performance, their enrichment, and help them to just be better citizens, better humans, right? So we're gonna look at how we can use some questions that really kind of get to the heart of what transformative SEL is. We all know what social emotional learning is, but now when we talk about it being transformative, we're really talking about the intersectionality of each particular student, of each individual, what makes each of us unique, and how we as educators can speak to that uniqueness and not just paint all of our students with the same SEL brush. And so now SEL is fabulous, right? And it's great, but we want to be able to see how we can really get to the heart of what's going on with each of our students, depending on who they are specifically, their backgrounds, what they're bringing to the table. So today we're going to talk, hopefully there'll be 5 ideas that you like or that you'll think about more. And then hopefully you'll have 3 that you'll practice. And then finally that 1 idea that you will take away, that you will actually adopt. And to be able to do this and to engage fully, it might be helpful if you have a pen and paper. So with your pen and paper, as we go through the work, the content today, jot down a few ideas and then circle 5 of them, okay? If something sounds interesting, something catches your eye, catches your ear, just jot down that idea, because writing that down helps your brain connect to it deeper so that you can really put into action the things that we talked about today. And then as we go further, underline 3 things that you know that you want to practice moving forward, okay? And then use that 1 thing at the end, put a star next to the 1 thing that you'll adopt. Now, there's another thing I want to tell you about today before we go into the different components of SEL, is that we're going to be doing a lot of breakout work. And in that means we're going to put you into breakout rooms. Right now, most of us have our cameras off, which is totally fine. However, when you go into your breakout rooms, please turn your cameras on. This is part of that social emotional learning piece. And if you were with us last week, we talked about SEL for adults as well as for students, right? So if we want to practice this as adults, we have to be fully engaged in learning and grasping that content. So even though a lot of us already have been doing SEL, we know about SEL, we want to really fully engage. And in order to do that, especially when you're in the smaller groups, because we'll probably put you in groups of 4 or 5, turning your camera on will help everyone to connect with you in a deeper way, a better way, okay? So now as we talk about transformative SEL, a lot of you remember the components of SEL that was brought to us by Castle, which is self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. These are the components of SEL that we're going to continue to talk about, but we're going to dig into each component and see how we can make it transformative. So if you can move forward. And so let's just kind of start with a check-in. Last week, our check-in was, our whip around was, what was your first piece of music that you bought? Do you guys remember that from last week? What was your first piece of music? So today we're going to talk about or you're going to put in the chat if your day, if your day today had a soundtrack, what song would the theme be? Okay, so what is your theme song for today? Okay, the soundtrack for today, your theme song for today. Please put that in the chats. Celebration. Yes, Tina Marie. Thank you. Anyone else? What would be your theme song for today? So my theme song for today would be, there's a song, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Teddy Pendergrass. It's called Wake Up, Everybody. That would be my theme song for today, to be to wake up. And so Vandisha says, good morning, Baltimore. Hairspray soundtrack. I love it. Kristen says, Pocket Full of Sunshine. Alyssa says, Lemon by Nerd and Rihanna and Pharrell. What's Lemon? Ooh, okay. Joe says, Move. And Sumya says EDM. Okay, is that EDM music just in general? And Jesse James McKnight says, I want to be a millionaire. Yep, so do I. Zora says, Feels Like Summer. Oh, I love that song by Childish Gambino. Karen says, Luther Vandross, Think About You. Nice, Karen. Lewis H says, oh, happy day. Oh man, is that like the choir Happy Day? I love that song too. Stephanie Rivera says Power. And Richard Burgess says New York State of Mind with Nas. Oh, the Nas New York State of Mind. Okay. Happy says Camille by Pharrell. And Nigel says Crazy by Gnarls Barkley. Oh man, great song. And Dante Lewis, who is our first person here, says Touch the Sky by Kanye West. And Gladys Brown says Shaka Khan, Ain't Nobody. Love that song. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And Dancing in the Moonlight by Marissa. We'll be dancing in the moonlight. Okay, I promise I won't sing every song. All right, and I'm getting the wrap it up here. So we're moving on. Thanks, Steph.
Please keep singing, E. I love it. I'm so loving all of the songs in the chat box. Amazing. This is our own little SEL playlist that we create together this morning. Again, folks, I'm Stephanie. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you this morning for part 2 of our series. And I know most of us, it sounds like a lot of us were with the leadership program last week with the amazing Erica and Elaine. But we did want to just kind of review a little bit on the tenets of transformative SEL for folks who maybe weren't able to be here last week. So again, we have our 5 competencies that I'm sure folks are very much familiar with in our SEL wheel here. Again, self-awareness, self-management. We're looking at also social awareness, relationship skills, and lastly, responsible decision-making. And again, last week, we were starting with self, right? That exploration, kind of unpacking these concepts for ourselves. And this week, we're going to kind of move a little bit forward into working with students. And what does transformative SEL look like when we are with our young people and also with our colleagues, certainly. So for many of us on the call today, right, all of our programs really bring these concepts into full view, right? Thinking about how we're weaving so beautifully these different competencies into our after-school programming, for myself into our mental health programming, our youth development work across organizations. So again, we're thinking about, okay, SEL. We're pretty familiar. So what is this whole transformative piece? So again, just quickly as a review, our definition here from Castle is a process by which young people and adults build strong, respectful, and lasting relationships that facilitate co-learning to critically examine the root causes of inequity and to develop collaborative solutions that lead to personal, community, and societal well-being. when I look at this definition, I think what really stands out to me is the word co-learning and the power of co. So there's so many different words that we might be able to brainstorm quickly. I'll invite that in the chat box now. What are other words that begin with CO that invite kind of this spirit of co-learning or co-partnership when we think about working with our students and our fellow colleagues? So just invite that for a few moments here. Co-partnership, collaboration is another word, but I'd love to hear what you all are kind of, what's coming up for you, what's resonating this morning. Barbara, thank you. Community, absolutely. The power of co is so right, so there in community and how we cultivate that across our programming. Thank you for that offering. I think as folks are maybe thinking about the power of co, I just want to really lift up, right? When we think about SEL, traditionally, a lot of social and emotional learning programs and curriculum have really focused on individual students and have had really a separation of context for our young people, oftentimes kind of ignoring the current and past socio-political context. So we're really inviting and widening our lens. We're really thinking about moving away from a one size fits all, as Elaine was saying, to programming, to curriculum that really invites person in environment, right? And thinking about the meaning of that and the power of that. And I'm loving these other words: cooperation, color, co-workers, companionship. Thank you so much, everyone. Really beautiful offerings today. So again, we're thinking about just quickly widening the lens, building upon the work from last week, thinking about, again, moving to more equitable circles here, right? We think, again, in the past, moving from our very large purple circle that was really focused on students, right? Their social and emotional skills, their mindsets, their academic learning. And then there we had in green, right, classroom factors like adult beliefs and mindsets. We had in orange, school and district systems and policies. And then in blue teal, the societal context. But as you see, that earlier infographic was not proportional, right? It was very disproportional. So now we're moving from that to the widening the lens with more time, energy, and focus to really unpack all of these really important elements that lends itself to more of a transformative SEL approach in our work. So one last kind of recap from Castle. Again, we have our competencies and some examples of moving the 5 competencies towards more of a transformational lens, if you will. So just very quickly, self-awareness. Some examples here are personal and sociocultural identities, the recognition of beliefs, mindsets, and biases. For self-management, we're really thinking about stress management, right? Self-care for adults, for our young people, perseverance and agency, right? For social awareness, we're thinking about perspective taking. We're thinking about deepening empathy and creating a sense of belonging and inclusion. Next, we have, of course, relationship skills and thinking about collaborative problem solving, another co-word here, right? The co-construction that has to take place when we're developing and cultivating the relationship skills, and also effective interpersonal communication. And then lastly, we're inviting a furthering of responsible decision-making that includes ethical responsibility, distributive justice, that word always messes with me a little bit, and then collective well-being. So we're really thinking about this as a roadmap to really elevating, widening our lens in the programming that we offer across our organizations for our students. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Elaine.
Thanks, Steph. So we're going to move into the different competencies, starting with self-awareness, which is the personal and sociocultural identities, recognition of beliefs, and mindsets of biases. So when we talk about self-awareness, we're talking about the ability to accurately recognize one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence our behavior, right? And the ability to accurately assess one's strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. And we want to look at our identifying emotions, accurate self-perception, recognizing our strengths, our self-confidence, and self-efficacy. And in this self-awareness piece, this is this first part of SEL where we're understanding and being aware of the self, but we're also able to articulate what is happening with ourselves. If our students are able to identify their emotions and speak confidently about themselves, speak confidently about positive things about themselves, identify things that they should work on, the challenges, but to have a greater understanding of what is happening within me, and not be on autopilot, but to be deliberate and intentional about speaking about these things about themselves, they're more apt to obviously build their social emotional learning and to build character. So these are things, and one of the things that it mentions here is growth mindset, which is the ability to understand that I can obtain skills and strengths through effort. And through effort, I can pretty much try and be anything I want, knowing that sometimes I might fail, things might not work out the way they always want to. But if I put effort into every turn, I can gain strength, I can gain abilities, and I can gain skills. And then the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset, where a fixed mindset believes you have it or you don't. Effort is not going to do that for you. You're either smart or you don't, or if it's too hard for you to work at something, then it's not worth having. So we want to encourage that growth mindset for students, because in having that growth mindset, they are able to have that self-awareness of who they are in each activity, who they are in their efforts in trying to build, grow themselves as mentally, physically, and just to build their character. So now here's where the meat is. And Danny, I just want to cue you, because after we go through this, you're going to go into groups. And Danny, if you can break, there are about 46 of us here, well, really 43. And I'd love to break everyone out into groups of about maybe 3 or 4, which I know will be a lot of groups, but it will allow you the time to have these conversations. These are transformative guiding questions from Castle, and they're really interesting in what we can start asking that is that built-in transformative SEL, right? So like sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out on our own, like, okay, well, what question do I ask in order to encourage this transformative piece? Well, these are some starter questions for you. And we're going to break out into groups, and we're going to focus on the blue question. And the blue question, I'd love for you guys, if you can either take a screenshot of it or write it down to remember this question when you go into your groups, is: in what ways does your identity inform who you are as an educator? So how interesting that it starts with you, right? And that's what we talked about last week. So how does your identity, your own identity, inform who you are as an educator? This is important as it relates to our students and how they see us and how we interact with them. It starts with us. So we're going to break into groups, and please remember this question, because in your group, you're going to answer this question to the group on: in what ways does your identity inform who you are as an educator? This is the time you get to brag about yourself on how great you are. Why are you here, right? So in what ways does your identity inform who you are as an educator? I'm going to give everybody about maybe 8 minutes. Yeah, let's start off with 8 minutes, and you might get more time from that. To answer that question. Are you ready, Danny?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, okay, so you're gonna go into your groups to have this discussion and click join.
Okay, you should all see a pop-up and you should be able to go into your room.
And for those who are still with us, make sure you click join.
Maya and Diana. We talked about a few different things. About our personal characteristics. We spent a little while talking about that, how we're all nurturing people. And me and Sumaya especially were like soft-spoken people, but we used that, how we may have seen that as a weakness or like something that might have held us back from being able to do our jobs, you know, because we're so public facing in this type of role. We use that as a way to be approachable to students and also to command their attention in a different type of way, not only from being loud or being the most exciting person, but whatever your strengths, whatever you think your weaknesses are, can be turned into a strength. We also talked about all of our backgrounds and how some of us may come from different racial backgrounds or economic backgrounds that might not have had the amount of resources that when we were growing up, that we want to like give these students like the best experience and open up their horizons as much as possible, but also being from different cultural and economic backgrounds, it kind of puts us on the same level as the students. We know what their struggles are, and we can guide them in that kind of way. So those are some things that we talked about in our group.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Thanks for sharing. Wow. Yeah, it's something how who you are really affects the what you do in the classroom. Thank you. Would someone else like to share?
I don't mind sharing.
Okay, Richard.
Yes, in my group we spoke about just multi-tiered representation. So I identify as a Black man, I'm also Latino, and I identify as a nerd. So like all these different levels of representation could like help the students kind of pick and like kind of reach the, okay, I'm also Black, I'm also a nerd. I also have these little different categories where I kind of relate to this person. It's easier for me to connect and understand what they're trying to say because we have this like just one pinpoint of connection.
Nice, nice. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. And one last person to share.
In our group, we also talked about group 13, I think. We also talked about age and how that can be like a barrier or something that people can use to help like your situation as an educator. So Danielle brought up a great point that was like, she knows educators who are much more mature and still find ways to be relatable to the kids and still keep themselves in the know about everything that's happening in the world. So I think, and like as a younger educator, I can see how my age makes me more relatable to the children. So I think that is one way.
Oh, awesome. That sounds great. Thanks, Alyssa. I appreciate it. So here's one thing I'd love for you guys to put in the chat. What's one way you can encourage and foster self-awareness in yourself as well as someone you know? To just think about that and put that in the chat. Unless you're really burning to unmute yourself, which I totally 100% support, but you can put it in the chat. What's one way that you can encourage and foster self-awareness in yourself? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to bring our students to this place, right? So we want to be able to foster this in them. We can't do it for them, but how can we help foster that? So regular self-reflections, yes. And breathing, yep, absolutely. Being able to just being aware is breathing and being aware of your breath as a person who meditates, which Gladys Brown says meditation, Charmisa says yoga, journaling. Yep, mindfulness. Wow, this is such an interesting track that you guys are on. Being observant, yes, yes. Wow, very self-aware, very self-aware. And taking notes, beautiful. Remember, speaking of taking notes, make sure you're jotting down things that are interesting, that you saw, that you heard for the end of this presentation. And Monica says, thinking twice before making moves. Yes. Asking for feedback. Yes, that's part of a growth mindset. Asking for feedback. I love it. I love it. Karen says, when something bothers you, ask why. Just ask why. Yep. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to Stephanie, who's going to talk about self-management.
Awesome. Thanks, Elaine. I was loving those powerful reflections, everyone. What a great start. We're going to pivot now and dig a little bit into self-management. So we're thinking about the furthering of this competency, right? And we're really wanting to unpack stress management, self-care, perseverance, and agency for the adults and for our children, our students, right? Our amazing, beautiful young people. Really thinking about the importance of this competency and then the lens that we bring to it with the transformative piece. So just a brief definition here. When we think about self-management, we're really thinking about the ability to successfully regulate one's emotions, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in different situations, right? How are we effectively managing stress, controlling impulses, and then motivating oneself? We also have here the ability to set and work towards personal and academic goals. So again, a lot of kind of the different buckets, if you will, under self-management are things like impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, self-motivation, certainly goal setting, and also organizational skills. And again, we're going to kind of keep moving through some really powerful, transformative guiding questions for educators. And Elaine and I really love this first one. She and I talk a lot about our mental health and wellness and the work that we do. So this question really asks us, what is the connection, right, between your sense of well-being and the educational experience that you provide your students? Or maybe you're not student facing. So perhaps it's your sense of well-being connected to the work experience that you provide your staff, your colleagues within your organizations. As so many of us have felt probably in our careers, right? Our systems and our settings are not necessarily set up to center wellness. If anything, right, it's about production, numbers, right, productivity. And so this piece of self-management is really focusing on the wellness piece. How are we doing as adults? And how is that connected to the educational experience that we provide our students or the work experience that we provide our fellow staff and colleagues if we're maybe in more of a leadership managerial position? So really thinking about this in context with everything that's happening in the world. I know we're probably coming into today's session with a lot in our hearts, with the backdrop of waiting for the jurors who are deliberating in the Derek Chauvin trial. So wanting to name that as we're just kind of going through these questions and really unpacking and processing a lot this morning, thinking again about wellness and well-being and the connection between self and the work that we do, the experience that we provide. Right, really holding Audre Lorde in my heart this morning. I know Elaine and I also reference quite heavily when we think about wellness, right? That self-care is not indulgent. As she reminds us, it's an act of self-preservation, which in her words is an act of political warfare, really thinking about, right, centering oneself and our wellness now more than ever in society, in our organization. So in just a few moments, we're going to kind of go ahead and break back out into groups with Danny's support. But as a reminder, if you maybe want to screenshot this first question, jot it down for yourself, we're going to be processing with each other again with what you're comfortable sharing. But what's that connection, right, between your sense of well-being, right, not just surviving, but thriving, right, we hope, each and every day in the educational or the work experience that you're providing, again, whether it's to students or whether it's to your colleagues. Okay, we'll spend probably, again, maybe about 6 to 8 minutes together processing this particular question. Thank you, Danny, for setting up the breakout groups again for this one.
And you can click join.
I think we have most of us back, right?
Yeah.
I just want to apologize and just name, I am working from my parents' house this week and they're doing some construction, of course. So if you hear any power tools My apologies. But I just want to spend a little bit of time processing and hearing from folks on maybe some themes that came up in your breakout groups today. If you want to go ahead and type in the chat, or also come on and share vocally, we welcome that. Oh, Gladys, construction literally started here too during the breakout. Oh my gosh, we're living the same reality right now, right? With the background noise. Stephanie, thank you. Photography. Can you share a little bit? Yeah.
So in our group, I was with Andre and Alicia. We talked about how our well-being, the things that we do, lend to the environment that we want to see. So self-care, and whether it's the little things we do or the big things, the massages, the nail salon, the hair, whatever. But also, more importantly, the self-talk that we have, and recognizing when negative self-talk is happening within your environment, with the kids, with the staff, and then giving them tools, whether it's a mantra or just like how to change that negative self-talk to create a better space for themselves. We also talked about sharing, and that fine line between sharing things that are appropriate and educational versus those people that just overshare, that just thinks that the kids are their friends. But also understanding that, our ability to share with our students allows them to be empathetic, and it also allows them to see different emotions, to understand different emotions, and to name different emotions. So, trying to be the Superman staff person that, nothing ever affects them, kids aren't going to learn a whole lot because they can't relate, they can't see themselves in you. But if they can see that, hey, the director, the group leader, my program, they have bad days too. And it's okay to have a bad day, to name it and like work through it and still do what you need to do to get done, and not check out and be like, I'm done with it. That allows kids to grow and understand SEL better.
That's so powerful what you're sharing, right? Thinking about the power, right, of vulnerability, of appropriate sharing, of kind of like the co-labor and the co-struggle in life that we often experience parallel, right, to our students. And then when we are sharing, right, whether it's to our colleagues or to our young people, I always ask myself, who am I in service to right now by sharing or by disclosing this part of my story, right? And if it's in service to a further connection, a deeper connection, that's appropriate, but there might be some teachable moments or shared humanity, then that's usually a pretty good indicator, right? And I often talk to my social work interns about that as well. But whenever we're kind of like sharing and it's tipping too much into the friend zone, that's where it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. Those internal rumble strips creep up a little bit of like, oh, wait a minute, we're going off the path a little bit. Let's pump the brakes. Let's not crash into the side of the road here. Let's kind of stay in the lanes that have been given to us, right? In terms of boundaries and appropriate relationships. So thank you for naming that, and the power of reframing, right? Negative self-talk to more positive self-talk for ourselves and for our students. That's incredible. Any other ideas or thoughts that came up?
I can go. So in my group, we were discussing, or at least I was thinking about, like, what is your purpose? Like, what brings you to the work of childcare? I was thinking about like my experience in working with various age groups and things like that, and just like why are you here? Like, what is your purpose in being in this profession? Because a lot of times when people go into the childcare profession, they think about, oh, just working with kids, you're playing around and running around with kids all day, but it's way more than that. It's much more than that. And sometimes people forget that. And I think it's important that if you're going to work with kids, actually want to be there, actually want to work with kids and love the work that you're doing. That way the experience is more meaningful for you and them, because if not, you're just wasting your time and their times. And unfortunately, if that sounds harsh, like, I'm sorry, but like it really is the reality of it, because kids really need you to be there to show up for them, because sometimes at home that's not the case for them. So if you're not there for them, then you might as well just not be there.
I love what you're saying. I really appreciate that, right? Like, if this isn't for you, then you can find something else, right? Like, this is really, this work comes with such great responsibility, right? Our young people deserve the best of the best, those who are really going to take the time and the energy to really hopefully impact the trajectory of their lives in the most positive of ways, right? So thinking about your why, thinking about that purpose, because oftentimes, right, if we're feeling burnt out by the work, then maybe it's something that we have to really consider on a really deep level. Is this work for me? Because perhaps it's time for, right, a change for some folks. So thank you for really naming that. It's really powerful, especially when our young people really want to be fully seen and valued, and they deserve a sense of community, right? That sense of belonging and shared connection. So really wonderful ideas, everyone. For sake of time, we're going to go ahead and give you all a little bit of a break. I'm going to pass it over to Elaine, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Steph. So yeah, just for 5 minutes, we're going to just kind of take a break and just be aware of what's happening in our bodies. So what I'd love for everybody is, if they can, in sitting in their chair, make sure that both of your feet are on the floor. And if you can take your hands and just put one on top of the other and sit it in your lap. You can close your eyes or you can keep them open. But if you're going to keep your eyes open, you can just focus on the young lady sitting on the table in front of you. You can turn your camera off if you like. And in this moment, I want everyone to just look at your breath. Just notice your breath in this moment. Don't try to change it, but just notice what's happening with your breath. Notice the cool air that's coming into your nose or your mouth. And notice the warm air that might be leaving. Notice your stomach or your chest that might be rising or falling. And notice yourself on the chair. Notice your body against the seat, your back against the back of the chair. Notice where your arms are in this moment, if they're touching your body or the chair. And now notice your well-being in this moment. How are you feeling? And see if you can give it a name. Calm, relaxed, anxious. And now just come back to your breath. Noticing your breath again. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes and come back to center. So just a little moment of looking at our breath right now. Okie doke, and let's move on.
Yes, thank you. That was really so grounding as always. Wonderful. So next I'm going to move us into social awareness. Thinking again about our transformative lens, right? Moving to a deeper unpacking of concepts like perspective taking, empathy, and belonging. So we're going to go ahead and look at this definition again that comes from Castle. When we think about social awareness, we're really thinking about the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others, right? Including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures. They have here, right, the ability to really understand social and ethical norms for behaviors and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. So we're going to be thinking about in our groups again in just a moment, perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and certainly respect for others is a big tenet of social awareness. Again, we have on this slide a lot of amazing questions for us to contemplate, for us to unpack and process. We went ahead and chose the second one for today's workshop, but again, all of these will be given to you to kind of go back and reflect on and hopefully maybe unpack even further in potential staff meetings and things like that. But we are asking in our groups this morning to think a bit deeper together and collectively on what types of discrimination are experienced in the United States. What types of also disadvantage are potentially experienced by your students, your participants. If you want to talk about self as well in this frame, in this question, that's more than fine. And again, just sharing what you feel most comfortable with this morning, again, with everything that's currently happening in our own socio-political context today, just really taking good care of yourself and your group members as you move through this question. And again, Danny's going to go ahead and set you all up for another probably 6 to 8 minutes. And then we'll come back together and just process briefly on this social awareness question.
Same amount of group, like 3 to 4 people.
Yeah, about 3 to 4. And
Yeah.
folks, when you see it pop up, if you can click join. And it should be on your screen now. So if you can just click join and join your group, that would be great. Looking at your screen and clicking join. And if you're having trouble with joining, unmute yourself and let us know if you do not see a room or what's happening for you right at this moment. Welcome back, welcome back.
Yes, welcome back, everyone. I'm sure that was a rich conversation. And again, I hope you're taking good care of yourself and one another as you were exploring and unpacking this one. Again, we were really thinking about types of discrimination here in the US and potentially also types of disadvantages experienced by your students, your participants. Are there a few examples that came up that any of the group members would like to name and center this morning? Go ahead and just allow folks, again, as always. Yes, Barbara, I see your hand is raised there. Thank you, Barbara.
Me and my breakout group, we discussed how recently, I'm not sure if people have seen on the news that they're trying to pass some laws, I would say specifically in the South, that are targeting transgender children, basically making it almost impossible for them to be to transition into the gender that they want to, making it illegal for them to take the medication they need, as well as basically invalidating their gender. And they're trying to pass this new law where they have, quote unquote, the right to check your gender, which is, as gross as it sounds, it's basically a strip search to see, in schools and stuff, which I think is very absolutely disgusting. But I was basically saying how when you create laws like these and when you create an environment where you basically invalidate children who are a part of the LGBT community, I feel like this is extremely dangerous because these children, they get scared of this. They're confused on what's going on. Why am I being seen as some type of, in the sense of like they're not being accepted. And I feel like when you create environments like these, you're also basically pushing these kids into depression, as well as sad as it sounds, this causes a lot of high suicide rates, because LGBTQ community children don't have an outlet to speak to people about how they feel about stuff like this. So definitely creating an environment in the school where you have kids understand that stuff like this is completely normal. You know, you shouldn't really look at in this day and age, you know, you shouldn't look at the LGBT community as like a taboo thing. Like, this is normal, you know, it's absolutely okay and accepting, and no matter where you go. So definitely that's one of the things we spoke about.
Barbara, thank you so much for centering that. It's just, there's so many atrocities in terms of legislation that's been passed and that's on the table. So I really appreciate that. And for all of us to really think deeply about how even hearing about that impacts our students who identify as a part of that community, or ourselves as adults who identify as a part of this community, right? Thinking about how that legislation completely dehumanizes those who are transgender, with prohibiting their access to appropriate medical care and even participating on sports teams, right? That's also been a lot in the news lately as well. So thank you for that. And I see another hand as well. Forgive me, I don't see the name because my boxes are so small. Odalis Revere?
Yes, Odalis.
Odalis, thank you. Go ahead and give you the mic.
Hi, good morning. So me and my group, we were talking about more so recently police brutality and like the discrimination against minority figures. And we were also talking about how like it goes back to like the sense of, if these are the authorities and they're targeting like the Black and Hispanic predominantly community, they're targeting that community more. It allows for everybody else to see us as targets as well. Because if those are the authorities and we're supposed to listen to what they're saying, and they're like, oh, this, like, you know, these type of people are the people that have the crime rates boosted to the ceilings. These are the people that are killing each other. You know, obviously everybody else around is going to be fearful. And like the fact that with the police brutality, going back to that, the numbers, like the ages of people that are dying from cops is like getting lower. It's not no longer 30, 40-year-olds. Yes, that's that. But now it's 19, 17, 15-year-olds, the young people, the youth, the next generation, the people that are supposed to become presidents and people that's supposed to become doctors, you know, because of the circumstances that they're living in, it sets them up for failure. And then on top of that, we're just not having the right image set for us from authorities that's allowing us to like view each other as a community, as people that should be together, versus as this person is a target, this person is someone that we should stray away from just because of the color of their skin or because where they come from. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what are we gonna do for our kids who are Black, Hispanic, Asian, you know, who don't have the privilege of, you know, walking safely and not having to worry about people thinking that they're in the supermarket to rob them, people thinking that, you know, they're going somewhere to hurt them, you know, that kind of thing. What can we do for those kids is like what we were talking about, because these are the same kids that want to be cops too. These kids, one day, when you're young, you're 5, 6 years old, one of the things you say is, I want to be a police officer when I get older. Because what they tell you from when you're young is that cops save people, they protect people. And then you go home and your uncle, your sister, your brother got killed by the same people you want to become. You know, it changes the whole mindset of this thing. So it's like, it's just so hard to like try to regain that kind of like comfort for people. Like, okay, not all cops are bad, you know, not all authority people look at us as savages, as animals. We could be better, we can be successful, you know. So like that's what we were talking about, my group.
So Odalis, I just want to speak to that, because the passion that I'm hearing from you and from folks who are speaking right now is our kids are not the only ones experiencing this, right? This passion is coming from a place of, we are experiencing this. It just so happens we're called community-based organizations because we are the community. We are here. A lot of us, some of us see our kids in our neighborhood, right? We're going to the store or we're on our way to work and we see our kids. So this affects us which is why our passion is there, and which is so interesting for us to be able to understand, like, what's affecting our students is also affecting us. When we're talking about that intersectionality, we are the intersectionality, right? So it helps us to be able to help our students cope as well. So thank you for speaking your truth, because it's affecting, it is just not only affecting our kids, it's absolutely affecting us, which is why we're so passionate this morning about it. Thank you.
Yes,
So
thank you so much. I see Nigel and Andre, and I do want to give you both the mic before we move forward. If either of you would still like to come on and share some of your thoughts. I'll go to Nigel first for the mic, and if not, we'll head over to Andre.
Yes, sorry for the noise. My daughter's taking a little class right now, but I think
All right.
we didn't speak specifically to any specific thing. I think we spoke general, and I'm trying to explain that. And the best way I could describe it is like right now we're discussing the fruit. So we're discussing racism, we're discussing police brutality. All of these are fruit. So you can stop the police brutality, you can stop the racism, but you have to kind of get to the root of the tree, because once you cut the fruit, it's just going to grow back in the later season anyway. So I think what we were discussing was just the fact of how we as a society have started lacking empathy, and that people are walking around more entitled now, and in the sense of like, and this transcends just cops and civilian or black and white. It's just it could be a teacher feel that they have this title, they went to school for this long, or a director, whatever it may be, and they lord these titles over the students or over the youth. And it's like when we do that and we lack empathy and just simple basic principle of humility, we miss the opportunity to connect with other human beings. We miss the opportunity to see them as such, because we're so focused on our titles or other things. And then through these type of things is how other things come out, like the discrimination against a certain race, or cops, civilians, and all these other things. So I think we need to go back to the basics of just humility, of empathy, and start from there.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I couldn't agree more. Really digging into the root of the systemic racism across, right? Policing, education, housing, employment, you name it, right? Really kind of naming it as white supremacy, as a white identified social worker. I really am leaning into that. So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Andre, and then we're going to move us forward just for sake of time. And again, we can keep commenting in the chat box, and just thank you for everyone for everything that you're offering today.
Hi, I was just saying, we were in group 4, we talked about just being 3 gentlemen of color, and how deadly it is just to exist in today's society. Because, for people who don't experience being a person of color, it's hard just being in your car, driving down the street and looking behind you when you see a cop car. Or just working in a neighborhood that's predominantly white, and I've experienced people throwing paint bombs at my building where my kids are, dumping trash that I have to clean up, breaking toilet bowls that we have to clean up, which is it blows my mind. And it's just, how do we move beyond that as people of color? Also, we talked about some of the disadvantages that are experienced by our students. I've been in a couple of situations where I worked in a school which was failing, and a lot of the teachers were Caucasian, teaching a group of kids that were the school was 98% African American. So there was a major disconnect. Just being a school in a hood, and then when the teachers get fed up, or they just fresh out of school, they got what they needed to get from the school, they move on. So there's no consistency with these kids, but then I transitioned to working in a building that's, like I said, that's in a predominantly white neighborhood. 2 blocks over and 2 blocks down are apartment buildings projects that has Arabic kids, African-American kids, low-income kids. So I have white kids and I have a mix of kids coming in. And I've had parents calling me, well, I hope that my child is not going to be bullied because they're coming to your program. You know, so it's just so many different dynamics, you know, that we as educators are facing in the society today. And we are the ones that we try to plant the seed in these kids that, okay, you can be the change of the future. You can be the next doctor. You can be the next president. You can be the next, hey, garbage man if you want to, because they all play an intricate role. But we just ask that one question, when will it stop? You know, because we were told that, you know, by our teachers that if you be a good citizen and do what you're supposed to do, abide the law, everything works well for you. It doesn't. Sad to say, but it doesn't.
Andre, thank you so much for sharing. As I was saying earlier, like this is, you know, this is a very, very personal topic for us, because while we're looking at how this affects our students, because some of us are not, like you said, you're working in the school right now where they're mostly white children, and obviously you are not white. It's important for us to be able to see that, because then there's something else that happens, right? What's affecting those students there? But as we're working with students that are not necessarily from our same economic background, it's important that we're able to have this broader lens to see what's affecting them. It just so happens that a lot of discrimination that happens for our students is also happening for us. So it's a hot topic, right? We could spend the whole hour and a half just on this, but I really want to, and I just apologize for, you know, I don't want to marginalize this piece. It is important. And the reason why Stephanie and I picked out that question out of all of the questions is it does affect us. It does hit us at home, which is why transformative SEL, it is personal, and we must personalize it. And even though we know we're going to do a job, let's face it, none of us are getting rich off of doing this work that we do as CBOs, right? We're doing it because there's some passion that's there. And then when it comes down to this discrimination piece, we feel it deeper because it affects us, but we feel it deep because it affects these kids that are so young. They're not old enough to really understand the broad picture in the way that we understand it, but we know that they soon will. However, it's affecting them. It is affecting them in that same way. So I appreciate that. I put my email in the chat, and Steph, if you could put your email in the chat also. If you guys would like to talk to us about this further, you can email us and we can talk about this further. And in the interest of time, I am going to kind of move on. And I appreciate you all. I appreciate your vulnerability, and I appreciate just sharing for some of us who might not have the same experiences that you may have on this line. So I'm gonna I'm gonna gloss over this, Steph. So if you can just move to the next one, because we're about to talk about the relationship skills that focus on communication, social engagement, relationship building, and teamwork. How do we build relationships? And I gotta tell you, for me, this is everything as far as I'm concerned. Building relationships. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what job you have. It doesn't matter who you know, what you're doing in the world, but how you connect to humans is where our fulfillment lies. How you connect with other people. And the proof is in that we have multiplied as humans, right? Because we're making connections with people. We're building relationships, friendships, parents, children, family, and romantic relationships. So for me, this is where the meat is. You can go to the next slide. So for this question, and you'll notice we've chosen only one question out of several that Castle has provided, but how do you ensure that you create an inclusive, safe learning environment for all your students? So given all of that we just talked about, right? We just talked about all of the discrimination that we experience. And even someone just said, I felt like was it you, Andre, but somebody said, then what do we do for these kids? Now what, right? Okay, this is what's happening in the world. Now what? How do we make sure that this environment is safe? How do we make sure this environment is inclusive for all of our students, So we're gonna break you into groups again. Danny, if you can queue up the breakout groups. We're only gonna give you 5 minutes because we are running short on, oh, we don't have 5 minutes. Yikes. Okay, so I'm sorry, I just looked at the time. We don't have 5 minutes. So I'm gonna just, when there's no breakout groups that are gonna happen, sorry, I'm pivoting. No breakout groups. Danny, no breakout groups. And if you guys can unmute yourselves, given what we just talked about, and you can raise your hand, maybe that might make it easier, but how do you make sure that you create an inclusive, safe environment for all of your students? Joe.
I try using a restorative approach, restorative practices, community circles, so that everybody is seen, heard, and valued. A lot of community agreements before, especially, revisiting community agreement before we're digging into a difficult topic and reestablishing the rules.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Andre. Oh, Andre, you're breaking up. Can you start again, please?
I would say just being observant and empathetic to your kids, and also keeping that line of communication with parents.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. Thank you. Being observant, that's the best thing that you can do. The best thing that you can do is to be observant. Absolutely. And you can keep moving, Stephanie. And just something to think of, how can you work, how can the work of SEL transform your relationships just in general? Just to think about that. And Stephanie, do you want to do responsible decision making? Do you want to?
I'll try to get us to 11:30 in rapid speed, but similarly, just thinking about the importance of ethical responsibility, collective well-being, and distributive justice. Forgive me on that word. It always messes with me again. But thinking again about the importance of this concept with our young people, with ourselves, with our staff members, when we're identifying problems, we're analyzing solutions. As a community, we're solving problems, right? That co-partnership, that sense of community, right? Evaluating, reflecting, considering the well-being of oneself and one another, and how we make decisions, like the impact, the consequences of our decisions on others. So one of our final questions here this morning, just to kind of give you something to consider moving forward, is this last one here. How can you create opportunities for the range of perspectives and talents in your classroom to be leveraged towards responsible decision-making that improves learning for all? Again, sorry about the background noise. So we're just kind of offering you this to think through after today's session, thinking again about how are we doing that, right, with our students, really creating these talents and perspectives to, again, be lifted up, to be leveraged in our programming, our after-school settings, our staff meetings, you name it. And we also have a slide here that has kind of a wrap-up slide. I know the bottom is a little bit cut off potentially on your view, but the slide deck that you'll get will have these questions as a nice summary from kind of what we talked a little bit about today and how you can continue to kind of think through a lot of these questions moving forward. I'm going to give it back over to Elaine to take us home here in the last minute or so.
So hopefully you wrote down, thanks Stephanie, 5 ideas that you thought about or that you liked, 3 that you'll practice, and 1 that you will adopt. And if you don't mind either unmuting yourself or putting in the chat, what's 1 practice that you will adopt? So, and you can share whatever you like, either 1 practice that you'll adopt or just something that you heard today that was impactful or interesting. I'd love if you'd unmute yourself, but if you want to put it in the chat, that would be fabulous too.
Hi, I would just like to say more self-awareness. And we spoke about, when you enter a classroom or when you work with students, whatever baggage you have going on in your personal life, we had, essentially said to leave it at the door and, just be a little bit more mindful about that. So that was one thing I definitely want to take away. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Artie. I appreciate that.
A
Nice.
comment that Andre and Joe made was the importance, like going into that self-awareness, taking time for yourself. It's really easy to give everything into this job and working with children, but there is also, you need to create that boundary within yourself and understand that it's okay to take time for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. And Tina Marie says the importance of self-image and how we can carry this into the classrooms, workplace, and society, which is important. Thank you, Tina. And Stephanie says, Rivera says, learning new language. So interesting, right? Absolutely. So I want to take us out with this quote by Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes. Hopefully you can have new eyes with an old theme, which is social emotional learning. And there were some things that you were able to pick up that maybe you thought were interesting today that were connected to something that you already knew about. So I hope that that can resonate with you in the future. But just also want to add that also Andre Brown was saying what he's taking away is positive affirmations daily, yes, which is important. And then and everyone's putting their name into the chat. Okie doke. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your participation today. Today was such a rich discussion. And if you'll join us again next week, where Stephanie will be back with us talking about creative inclusive classrooms and environments as it relates to social emotional learning, transformative SEL. And Stephanie, anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's so much warmth and gratitude to everybody today on the call. And I hope that you can join us for the final session next Thursday at, again, 10 a.m. If you're able to be there, it'd be great to be back in community with all of you. But have a beautiful rest of your day. Take good care. And we hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Take care, you guys. After you've put your name in there, you can totally log out. Thank you. Bye, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was
Thank
awesome.
you.